Zipporah is a mysterious figure, often overshadowed in the stories that circulate about Moses. A woman whose name almost disappears among her husband's great achievements, but whose importance is undeniable. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why is her presence so enigmatic? These are questions that few dare to ask, but which reveal interesting facts about history that connect us to ancient times. Its role goes beyond what is written, hidden between the lines of the sacred narrative. The Bible gives us small glimpses of Zipporah, a woman who not only married Moses, but who played a crucial role in key moments in his life. However, his story is shrouded in mystery, suggesting that there was more than was revealed. What the Bible does not explicitly mention leaves room for speculation and discovery. Like any ancient story, the omissions speak as much as the words. And, when we talk about Zipporah, there is a lot to be unraveled. Why is his story so important for understanding the life of Moses? She was not just his life companion, but a bridge between two cultures, two realities. Of Midianite origin, Zipporah brings with her a different heritage, which has often been neglected. Her marriage to Moses was not just a union of hearts, but a meeting of different worlds. This seemingly insignificant detail has profound implications for the curiosities of both their stories. And so, we begin our journey to unveil the figure of Zipporah, Moses' secret wife, who the Bible barely mentions. His presence at the prophet's side was essential at crucial moments, and it is impossible to understand the entirety of Moses' mission without understanding who Zipporah was. And now, as we delve into his story, prepare to discover what many ignore about this fascinating figure. It was in the heat of the desert of Midian that the destinies of Moses and Zipporah crossed for the first time. Moses, fleeing Egypt after committing an act that would change his life, found himself in search of shelter, peace, and perhaps even a new purpose. And it was next to a simple water well that their journey was interrupted by an unusual scene. 7 sisters, sheep herders, facing difficulties to satisfy the flock, prevented by local shepherds. Moses, with his innate sense of justice, intervened, not knowing that among those women was Zipporah, his future wife. Zipporah, the eldest daughter of Jethro, the priest of Midian, must certainly have seen something special in this man. A stranger in unfamiliar lands, Moses offered protection and ensured that the sisters could care for their sheep. What was just an act of kindness triggered a series of events that would lead him to become part of that family. And so, the story began to unfold, uniting Moses and Zipporah in a web of events that few could predict. Zipporah's impact on Moses' life was immediate. His father, Jethro, upon learning of the help that Moses had offered his daughters, not only thanked him, but also welcomed him into his home. Moses, a man who had fled without looking back, suddenly found in Zipporah and her family a new home, a safe haven. It was from this encounter that Moses began to feel that his exile was not just a punishment, but a period of preparation. And Zipporah, without knowing it, became part of this greater purpose. And now we reflect. Would Moses have been the leader we know without the encounter with Zipporah? Destiny seemed to plot something beyond the visible. Zipporah's support and serenity began to shape his new life. But this was just the beginning. And so, we continue with curiosity to discover how this woman would influence Moses' future and the role she would have in his divine mission. Jethro, Zipporah's father, was a man of profound wisdom and spiritual authority, respected by both his family and his people in Midian. His role in Moses' life was more than just that of a father-in-law. Jethro welcomed him, offering not only a home, but also advice that would shape his future leadership. This connection between Moses and Jethro was vital to his development as a leader, preparing him for the challenges he would face in liberating Israel. Jethro's influence is one of the curiosities of history that often goes unnoticed. Jethro's wisdom is revealed at key moments, but perhaps most notable was his guidance to Moses on how to manage the people of Israel. Moses, burdened with the responsibilities of leading an entire nation, was on the verge of collapse. It was Jethro who observed the burden and suggested that he delegate responsibilities, creating a more efficient leadership structure. This advice, coming from a man who was not part of the Hebrew people, shows the importance of Jethro in the life of Moses and how his words had a lasting impact. In addition to his influence as a counselor, Jethro played a crucial role in Moses' marriage to Zipporah. He was the one who recognized the potential in Moses and encouraged him to take on the role of husband and father, even in the midst of his growing responsibilities. Moses' marriage to Zipporah was not only a union of two people, but also a symbol of how Moses was being prepared for his greater mission. Jethro's support, both emotional and practical, gave Moses the foundation he needed to continue his journey. And so, by looking at Jethro's influence on Moses' life, we can see how a wise man can alter the course of historical events. Jethro was not just a distant father-in-law, but a key figure who helped shape the prophet who would liberate Israel. And now, with this new foundation, we move on to explore how the marriage of Moses and Zipporah developed, and how this union would impact the destiny of an entire nation. The marriage between Moses and Zipporah was not just an ordinary event, but a union marked by divine purposes and profound challenges. From the moment Moses met her at the well, fate seemed to conspire for the two to meet. The ceremony, which was probably as simple as life in the desert, symbolized the union of two worlds, the Hebrew and the Midianite. Zipporah's role as wife was not limited to the traditions of the time. She would become a vital partner in the journey to come. Her marriage to Moses was the starting point for a new chapter in his life. Zipporah was not just the wife of a leader in the making. She was his confidant and companion in times of uncertainty. During their years in Midian, she supported him as he processed his past and prepared, without even knowing it, to lead the people of Israel. Like any couple, they faced challenges and tensions, but Zipporah demonstrated strength that went beyond what was expected. His role as confidant is one of the story's curiosities that is rarely highlighted, but which was essential for Moses' emotional balance in his darkest moments. Moses' prophetic call brought a huge weight to the couple. Zipporah, on the one hand, had her roots in Midian, and on the other, her destiny was alongside Moses, a man called to a divine mission. As a wife, Zipporah faced the difficult reality of supporting a husband who had to choose between his family and spiritual duty. This was not an easy choice for either of them. Zipporah could have decided to remain in her homeland, but she chose to walk alongside Moses, showing a courage that is not often mentioned. As Moses approached his destiny as the liberator of Israel, Zipporah's role in his life became increasingly clear. She was not just a passive wife, but a woman who influenced his decisions and helped him stay focused on his mission. Their union was tested several times, but Zipporah's love and dedication proved to be essential for Moses to fulfill the calling that God had placed in his path. And now, we continue to understand how Zipporah, as Moses' wife, dealt with the challenges of living in Midian, far from the tumult of Egypt and the mission that awaited her. Life in Midian for Zipporah was, at the same time, simple and full of responsibilities. As Moses' wife, she lived far from the chaos of Egypt, but the desert brought its own challenges. Daily life involved herding, caring for children, and managing a house in arid lands. However, his greatest task was perhaps to provide emotional support to Moses, a man who lived torn between his past in Egypt and the destiny that awaited him. As the world around her continued to spin, Midian was her refuge and her daily challenge. Despite the physical distance from Egypt, Zipporah knew that Moses was on a path that would eventually lead him back to his origins. Midian, with its mountain and desert landscapes, became the setting where Moses reflected on his future. Zipporah, in turn, took care of her family with silent strength. Although she lived in a different culture than Moses, she managed to adapt, preserving her Midianite roots while raising her children for a future she knew was uncertain. It was a dance between two worlds. But living in Midian did not mean that Zipporah's life was peaceful. She faced cultural and family challenges. Being the wife of a Hebrew in Midianite lands brought a veiled tension, a difference that Zipporah had to learn to manage wisely. Furthermore, the resistance between Hebrews and Midianites was palpable, an invisible line that Zipporah walked daily. Yet her love for Moses sustained her, as did her silent faith in what the future might bring. Over time, Zipporah understood that her role alongside Moses was more than just being a wife and mother. She was paving the way for something bigger, something that perhaps not even she herself could have predicted. And now we move on to explore how Zipporah faced the dilemma of following Moses on his mission or remaining in her home, a challenge that anyone who has ever had to choose between their heart and duty can deeply understand. When Moses received the divine call to return to Egypt and free his people, Zipporah was faced with a difficult choice. She knew her husband's destiny was intertwined with a greater purpose, but that didn't make the decision to follow him any less challenging. For Zipporah, it was more than leaving her home. It was leaving your roots, your homeland, and going to a place where the risks were immeasurable. The dilemma between staying safe or supporting her husband in his life's mission was one of the greatest trials she would face. Zipporah, in turn, did not allow herself to be overcome by fear. He decided to follow Moses' side, even though he knew that uncertainties and dangers would be constant. This was an act of courage and loyalty, which showed not only his love for Moses, but his confidence in the divine calling he had received. Rarely is a wife called upon to support her husband in such a risky mission, but Zipporah knew her place was at his side. This decision would shape not only Moses' future, but also the destiny of a nation. The difficult decision to leave her homeland was a reflection of Zipporah's inner strength. While many would have chosen to stay safe, she chose uncertainty. His journey alongside Moses was, in a way, a preparation for the exodus that would happen. Zipporah didn't know exactly what awaited her, but she was willing to face the unknown alongside her husband. This crucial moment in her life is one of the curiosities of the story, revealing the depth of this woman's character. And so, with Zipporah at Moses' side, the first stage of their mission was about to begin. The decision to follow Moses changed the course of their lives forever. And as they walked towards Egypt, Zipporah knew the path would be arduous. But what she couldn't predict were the supernatural challenges that lay ahead, and how vital her role would be in saving Moses' life and ensuring that the divine mission continued. As Moses and Zipporah continued their journey towards Egypt, a mysterious and frightening event occurred that almost cost Moses his life. The Bible briefly but cryptically reports that God sought to take Moses' life along the way. It is an episode that raises many questions and that to this day remains shrouded in mystery. However, it was Zipporah who, with speed and determination, intervened and saved her husband's life at a critical moment. A heroic act that few remember, but which changed the course of Moses' mission. Zipporah's intervention was dramatic and full of symbolism. She performed her son's circumcision, a rite that signaled God's covenant with the Hebrew people. This apparently simple act was what prevented Moses' death. Zipporah, who was of Midianite origin and did not share Hebrew culture, understood at that moment the importance of obeying the laws of her husband's God. His quick and decisive action shows not only his intelligence and courage, but also his ability to understand the divine in a critical situation. This incident is one of the most mysterious passages involving Moses and Zipporah. Why would God have threatened Moses' life at that moment? And how did Zipporah know exactly what to do to save her husband? These are interesting facts about the story that make us reflect on the depth of their relationship and how Zipporah was destined to play an essential role. What is clear is that without his intervention, Moses' mission would have been stopped before it even began. And so, the destiny of Moses and the entire mission he carried on his shoulders was preserved thanks to Zipporah's courage. His role, often overshadowed, was vital for the liberation of the Hebrew people to happen. Now, we move forward to better understand the role of women like Zipporah in Scripture, and how they challenge the norms of their time, leaving a legacy that echoes today. Women in Scripture often play pivotal roles, even if their stories are not fully revealed. Zipporah, wife of Moses, is one of those figures whose importance went far beyond what is recorded in detail. She, like many other biblical women, defied the norms and expectations of her time. Zipporah was not a passive spectator. At crucial moments, she made decisions that altered the course of history. This pattern repeats itself throughout Scripture, where women, even in the background, shape events in surprising ways. The role of Zipporah and other women like her was often shaped by circumstances and the need for immediate action. When the fate of their husbands or their families was at stake, they did not hesitate to act. As happened in the incident on the way to Egypt, Zipporah acted quickly and courageously, saving Moses' life. In many curiosities of biblical history, women are not portrayed as background characters, but as agents of change, challenging the limited vision of society at the time. It is important to reflect on how Zipporah challenged the cultural and religious norms of her time. Of Midianite origin, she represented a link between two cultures and was able to integrate into the Hebrew context without losing her identity. The women of Scripture, like Zipporah, demonstrated inner strength and unshakable faith, often making decisions that would change the course of their families and nations. The Bible, even without giving detailed details, offers us examples of how they played crucial roles in divine plans. And so, as we understand the role of Zipporah and other women in Scripture, we see that their impact is deeper than we realize. They not only supported their families, but also influenced the destinies of entire peoples. Now, we continue to follow Zipporah's trajectory, exploring her role as guardian of Moses' family, especially during the times when he was away fulfilling his divine mission. During the times when Moses physically distanced himself from his family to fulfill his divine calling, Zipporah assumed the role of guardian of the house. She not only took care of her children, but also kept the family together in a time of uncertainty and danger. His quiet strength, his ability to manage the demands of everyday life, was crucial in ensuring that Moses could focus on his mission. In many moments in biblical history, we see how women, even from a distance, played an essential role in the success of their husbands. Loneliness was something that Zipporah had to learn to endure. When Moses returned to Egypt, he was not only physically separated from his family, but also emotionally distant, embroiled in a spiritual battle to free his people. For Zipporah, this meant having to deal with Moses' constant absence while continuing to raise her children. The care she took for her family, even in the midst of uncertainty, is one of the many curiosities of history that reflect the strength of biblical women. Even without the constant presence of Moses, Zipporah did not let herself be discouraged. She found strength in her faith and resilience. Their children, the fruit of this extraordinary union, were the living inheritance of Moses and Zipporah. She knew how to guide and protect her children, preparing them for the uncertain future that awaited them. Moses' absence did not weaken his family, as Zipporah was the foundation that held everyone together. Their dedication to the home, while Moses faced the forces of Pharaoh, reveals the importance of women in maintaining balance in families and faith. Thus, as we explore this phase of Zipporah's life, we understand how the role of guardian of the family was an act of love and devotion. It supported the foundation that allowed Moses to fulfill his mission, even at the cost of his own emotional sacrifice. And now, we move on to Zipporah's reunion with Moses, a moment that would reveal the profound changes that occurred in their lives and in the destiny of the Hebrew people. After the liberation of the people of Israel, Zipporah and Moses finally met again. This moment, although little detailed in the scriptures, marks a new phase in their lives. Zipporah, who had remained in Midian while Moses faced Pharaoh and led the Exodus, now rejoined her husband. This reunion was not just a family reunion, but a reconciliation with the new roles they both had to play. Their reunion brings with it the feeling that destiny, once again, brought them together for a greater purpose. Zipporah found a transformed Moses, now not just a leader, but a prophet, carrying the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. The man she had left behind, who had gone as a shepherd, returned as Israel's deliverer. For Zipporah, this meant adjusting to this new reality, where her life alongside Moses would be different from anything she had known until then. Despite the changes, the love and loyalty between the two remained intact, strengthened by the challenges they faced from a distance. In the new nomadic life of the people of Israel, Zipporah adapted to the role of wife, to a leader who was constantly on the move. She knew that, just as before, her support for Moses would be essential so that he could continue to guide the people. While the reunion was a blessing, it also brought new responsibilities. Their marriage, tested by time and circumstances, now became an example of perseverance and faith in the midst of an endless journey through the desert. With Zipporah's return, Moses found the emotional stability he needed to continue his mission. Their reunion brought to light the importance of family, even in times of uncertainty and conflict. Together again, Zipporah and Moses continued their journey, ready to face the new challenges that the desert and the leadership of a nation would bring. And so, we move on to understand Zipporah's role as a mother, and her influence on the children she shared with Moses, perpetuating the legacy of a family destined to shape history. Zipporah, in addition to being a wife, also played a crucial role as the mother of Moses' children. His two sons, Gershon and Eleazar, carried the legacy of a man chosen by God and a woman whose strength shaped their family's destiny. Although little is said about them in Scripture, we know that Zipporah raised them with the wisdom of a woman who understood the challenges of being part of two cultures. Gershon's name, which means pilgrim in a foreign land, reflects the journey of Moses and Zipporah and how it influenced the lives of their children. Zipporah's relationship with her children is an example of how maternal influence can shape a generation. She raised them amid the uncertainties of the desert, while Moses faced the challenges of leading a nation. Zipporah knew that her children were not just part of an ordinary family, but heirs to a divine mission. In many ways, she was the bridge that connected her children to the greatness of Moses' calling. The balance she maintained between caring for her family and supporting her husband is one of the story's curiosities that is rarely explored. Zipporah's legacy can also be seen in the continuity of Moses' lineage. His children, although not as prominent in the scriptures as their parents, bore the responsibility of perpetuating the name of Moses. And it was Zipporah who ensured that they grew with the necessary strength to face an uncertain future. She, as a mother, knew how to nurture in them a sense of purpose, even in the midst of the chaos and tribulations they faced in the desert. And now, as we look at Zipporah's role as a mother, we see how decisive her influence was, not just for Moses, but for the continuation of his legacy. She was the quiet force that ensured her children were prepared for what came next. And so, we move on to explore the cultural tensions that Zipporah faced as a foreigner among the Hebrews, and how this shaped her life in the desert alongside Moses and his family. Zipporah, being of Midianite origin, lived among the Hebrews as a foreigner, facing suspicious looks and a different cultural environment. Even though she was Moses' wife, she never stopped being a woman who carried the influence of her roots, which certainly brought challenges in her relationship with the people her husband led. The Hebrews, recently freed from Egypt, were shaping their identity as a nation, and the presence of Zipporah, a woman from another culture, aroused tensions and veiled prejudices. Adapting to this reality was a constant test for her. The cultural challenges Zipporah faced were not just superficial. There were religious, practical, and even customary issues that separated it from the Hebrews. She brought with her traditions and ways of life that did not align with Hebrew precepts, and this difference was deeply felt. However, Zipporah showed admirable resilience in dealing with these difficulties, without ever losing her identity. His ability to remain firm, without renouncing his roots, is one of the curiosities of the story that reveals his silent strength. Despite the tensions, Zipporah never let cultural differences affect her relationship with Moses. She understood his role as a leader, and knew that for her husband's divine mission to be successful, she would need to endure the discomfort of being seen as other. This required a delicate balance between respecting Hebrew culture and maintaining his personal convictions. In the end, Zipporah proved that it is possible to find harmony amid the clash of cultures, an example of overcoming that still resonates today. And so, as we move through Zipporah's story, we see how these cultural tensions shaped her experience in the wilderness but never defined her. She remained true to herself while supporting Moses in his leadership. Now, we move on to explore the Bible's silence on Zipporah, reflecting on the reasons why her story is not as detailed and what this teaches us about forgotten women in Scripture. Zipporah's story, like that of many women in Scripture, is marked by an intriguing silence. Although he played a crucial role in Moses' life, the Bible offers only glimpses of his journey, leaving much unsaid. This leads us to reflect on what this silence means and what we can learn from it. Zipporah, even though she was essential in decisive moments, did not receive the same prominence as other biblical characters. His life, for the most part, remains hidden between the lines of Scripture. This silence, however, does not diminish the importance of Zipporah. On the contrary, he challenges us to read beyond the words, to understand the impact she had on biblical history. The lack of details about her life raises questions about the representation of women in the sacred narrative. Zipporah is, in a way, a symbol of the many women whose stories have been relegated to oblivion. They were there, in the shadows, supporting the family, offering advice, saving lives, but often their voices were not recorded. Why does the Bible omit so much of the story of Zipporah? Perhaps the purpose is to make us recognize the importance of women, even when they are not in the spotlight. The silence over Zipporah is a reminder that the most significant contributions are not always recognized in words, but are felt in actions and lasting legacies. She was at Moses' side at his most critical moments, and her presence shaped the events that transformed Israel's history. And so, as we reflect on what the Bible fails to tell us, we understand that silence also has power. He invites us to fill in the blanks and imagine the depth of Zipporah's influence. Now, we move on to understand how the conflict between Zipporah and Miriam, Moses' sister, added an extra layer of complexity to their story and reveals the impact of family tensions. The relationship between Zipporah and Miriam, Moses' sister, was not without tension. Miriam, a strong and respected figure among the Hebrews, apparently did not see Zipporah with the same eyes as Moses. Cultural differences and the fantasy of Zipporah being a foreigner may have contributed to the rivalry that arose between the two women. This conflict, although briefly mentioned in the Bible, makes us think about how family relationships can be affected by external factors, such as ethnicity and tradition. Jealousy and mistrust are not uncommon in families where different cultures meet. The episode in which Miriam expresses her discontent with Zipporah results in divine intervention. The Bible reports that Miriam was struck by an illness, a punishment that, for many scholars, reflects the severity of the conflict between the two women. Miriam's discontent was not limited to cultural issues. She also questioned Zipporah's role in Moses' life. This event reminds us that even in sacred stories, human emotions such as envy and pride have profound consequences. Zipporah, on the other hand, does not appear to be reacting directly to these tensions, which may indicate her quiet strength and resilience. Even in the face of Miriam's disapproval, she continued by Moses' side, fulfilling her role as wife and mother. His ability to endure these conflicts without losing his dignity shows the depth of his character. It's a curiosity of the story that so many of these family interactions are not detailed, but they still have an immense impact on the dynamics between the biblical characters. Thus, when we explore this conflict between Miriam and Zipporah, we understand that family tensions are a constant, even among those who are called to great missions. Zipporah, with her foreign origin, continued to be an essential figure, despite the barriers imposed by Miriam's distrust. And now, we move on to discover more about the faith of Zipporah, a woman of deep convictions who accompanied Moses on his spiritual and personal journey. Zipporah was a woman of faith, whose beliefs were shaped by her coexistence with Moses and life in the desert. Although coming from a different culture, she was open to her husband's faith and the God of Israel, accompanying Moses on his spiritual journey. Her quiet faith was not displayed extravagantly, but was manifested in her actions, such as the circumcision of her son when she intervened to save Moses. This act of devotion and obedience reveals that Zipporah understood divine demands, even when they went against her family traditions. Zipporah's spiritual journey is a reflection of many women whose stories are not fully told. She lived in the shadow of Moses, but her faith was essential to his mission. Zipporah may not have been the prophetic voice like Miriam, but she was a source of spiritual stability. Zipporah's faith grew over time, as did her understanding of Moses' calling. And in the middle of the desert, this faith was put to the test several times, always revealing its inner strength. Furthermore, Zipporah's trust in the God of Moses shows that she was a woman of convictions. Coming from a family of Midianite priests, Zipporah was able to move between two spiritual spheres, integrating herself with the Hebrew people without losing her essence. His example shows us that faith doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It is often acts of loyalty, courage, and wisdom that reveal the depth of a person's beliefs. Zipporah embodied this truth with a calmness that inspired those around her. And so, when we look at Zipporah's spiritual life, we realize that her journey was marked by confidence and resilience. The faith she developed alongside Moses was essential not only for her, but also for the mission of freeing the people of Israel. Now, we move on to a crucial moment, the event in which Zipporah protected Moses, saving his life and ensuring that the divine mission continued to run its course. Zipporah will always be remembered as the woman who, at a critical moment, saved Moses' life. During the journey towards Egypt, when God wanted to take Moses' life, it was Zipporah who intervened decisively. In a quick and resolute action, she circumcised her son, fulfilling the ritual that had been neglected. This seemingly simple act was what saved Moses, allowing him to continue his divine mission of freeing the people of Israel. What many don't realize is that, without Zipporah, history could have taken a completely different direction. Zipporah's role as protector of Moses goes beyond this specific moment. Throughout their journey, she was by his side, even when the difficulties were overwhelming. This incident on the way to Egypt, however, highlights how essential Zipporah was to the fulfillment of Moses' calling. By performing an act that, in a certain way, symbolized the covenant between God and the Hebrews, Zipporah showed her deep understanding of what was at stake. She knew that for Moses to fulfill his mission, certain things could not be neglected. Zipporah not only protected Moses physically, but also spiritually, ensuring that he conformed to divine demands. His courageous action is one of the curiosities of biblical history that is rarely emphasized. However, it was a turning point in Moses' life. Zipporah showed, at that moment, that her role in Moses' mission was much more than that of a simple wife. She was a spiritual partner and an active supporter of the greater cause that brought them together. And now, as we consider this event, we see how Zipporah was destined to be a crucial figure in the life of Moses. His act of protection was essential for Moses' journey to continue. As we go along, we explore the impact of this action and Zipporah's role during the Exodus, where she continued at Moses' side, supporting him as he led the people of Israel out of Egypt. The Exodus was one of the greatest challenges Moses faced, and by his side, Zipporah was always present, offering silent support. Although she is not always in the most visible Exodus narratives, her presence was essential in keeping Moses balanced during the most tense moments. Leading a newly freed people on a journey through barren lands required much more than physical strength. It demanded emotional stability, something that Zipporah provided Moses behind the scenes. She was the woman who, without drawing attention to herself, helped support the man chosen by God. Zipporah endured the same hardships as the rest of the people, crossing the desert and facing the challenges of nomadic life. However, its role went beyond simple physical support. His spiritual and emotional strength was an anchor for Moses. She understood the weight on her husband's shoulders and knew that without adequate support, he could crumble under the pressure. The journey through the desert was both a test of faith for the people of Israel and a test of endurance for those closest to Moses. Although her name is not mentioned in many of the decisive moments of Exodus, it is impossible to ignore Zipporah's impact on Moses' life. Often, the figures who work in silence are the most fundamental to the success of great leaders. Zipporah was one such figure, a woman who, despite her different origins, embraced her husband's destiny and became an essential part of the liberation narrative. The story of the Exodus would be incomplete without recognizing the importance of Zipporah, even if she is not constantly in the spotlight. And so, we continue to understand the mystery surrounding the end of Zipporah. The journey of liberation of the Hebrew people continued, but what happened to Zipporah? Little is known about his final days, and the lack of details raises more questions than answers. Now, we explore this enigma, reflecting on the silence surrounding the final fate of this woman so crucial to Moses' life. The end of Zipporah's story is shrouded in mystery. The Bible does not offer us many details about his last days, which raises a series of questions. We know of her importance in Moses' life, of her role as wife and mother, but after the reunion with Moses and the beginning of the crossing of the desert, her name practically disappears from the biblical accounts. This silence about Zipporah's fate is one of the great curiosities of biblical history, leaving room for interpretations and theories about what may have happened to her. Some scholars speculate that Zipporah may have returned to Midian, her homeland, while Moses continued with the people of Israel towards the Promised Land. Others believe that she simply passed away during the desert journey, like many others who did not live to see the end of the crossing. Whatever the case, the mystery surrounding his disappearance leaves a void, both in the narrative and in the understanding of his ultimate role. Zipporah, who was at Moses' side in the most crucial moments, leaves the scene silently. This lack of information about Zipporah's fate makes us reflect on the way many stories about biblical women end, abruptly, without much explanation. However, it is important to remember that Zipporah's impact was felt far beyond her physical presence. His influence on Moses, his sons, and even the course of Israel's history cannot be erased, even if his end remains an enigma. Sometimes it is in silence that we find the greatest lessons, and Zipporah's life teaches us to value the impact that a person can have, even without major appearances. And so, we move on to explore Zipporah's legacy to women in the Bible and beyond. Even without knowing exactly what happened to her, Zipporah's example resonates as a symbol of strength, courage, and resilience. Now, let's understand how this extraordinary woman influenced the generations that came after her, leaving an example for many others to follow. Zipporah's legacy echoes through the generations, even if her name is not as often remembered as those of other biblical figures. She stands as an example of quiet strength and resilience, traits that many women in Scripture also demonstrated in the midst of difficult circumstances. Zipporah proved that a person's impact does not depend on visibility, but on the actions they take at crucial moments. Her willingness to act silently without seeking recognition is a testament to her wisdom and humility, qualities that inspired other women in the Bible. For many women in Scripture, like Zipporah, the main role was often behind the scenes. They did not lead armies or speak directly to God like the prophets, but their influence shaped the destinies of their families and nations. Zipporah is a symbol of those who, even in silence, left a profound mark on history. She joins figures like Sarah, Ruth, and Esther, women who, with their faith and determination, helped write essential chapters in the history of the people of Israel. Zipporah's legacy shows that female strength lies not only in power, but also in patience and wisdom. Zipporah also left an example of how to reconcile different cultures and beliefs without losing your identity. Coming from a Midianite family, she embraced the Hebrew destiny without renouncing her roots. In times of conflict and transition, like the Exodus, his ability to find balance between two worlds was a valuable lesson. This aspect of Zipporah's legacy reminds us that cultural differences do not need to be obstacles, but bridges that teach us to have more empathy and understanding. Zipporah was more than a foreigner among the Hebrews. She was a model of how to live in harmony with who we are and who we have become. And now, as we reflect on Zipporah's impact, we see that her legacy is not just an example for the women of the Bible, but for all people who face challenges in their personal journeys. Zipporah reminds us that silence can sometimes be a powerful form of leadership. With that, we move on to examine how Zipporah shaped the life and destiny of Moses, being an essential piece in his divine mission. The relationship between Zipporah and Moses was marked by a profound intertwining of their journeys and destinies. From the moment they met, it was clear that Zipporah's role in Moses' life would be much more than that of a simple wife. She became his soul partner, the woman who supported him emotionally and spiritually, as he took on the divine calling to free the people of Israel. Zipporah shaped Moses in ways few recognized, preparing him for the monumental mission that lay ahead. Moses, the great prophet and leader, was human and full of doubts, and it was Zipporah who helped him find himself in moments of greatest uncertainty. The balance she brought to his life was essential for him to be able to withstand the pressure of leading an entire nation. Although the scriptures do not detail the dialogues between them, it is easy to imagine the emotional impact that Zipporah had on Moses, strengthening him in moments of weakness. Her strength, in many ways, made Moses even more capable of fulfilling his destiny. Zipporah wasn't just by Moses' side by chance. His role in shaping the leader we know today was divinely orchestrated. Each challenge they faced together, from the incident on the way to Egypt to their years in the desert, served to shape them as a couple and as individuals with a greater mission. Moses' destiny cannot be separated from Zipporah's, as she was one of the key players who helped prepare him for what was to come. She was his anchor, his silent refuge amidst the chaos. And so, we see that the fates of Zipporah and Moses were deeply intertwined from the beginning. Every step Moses took was influenced by the presence and support of Zipporah. Now, we move on to understand why Zipporah's story matters today, and what we can learn from her silent but impactful journey. Zipporah's story resonates to this day because she represents many of the silent struggles people face. Amid the grandeur of biblical events, his presence was often discreet but essential. Your journey teaches us about resilience, strength, and the importance of supporting those at the center of great missions. Zipporah was not a figure who sought glory or recognition. She worked behind the scenes, ensuring that Moses' mission could continue. This lesson of humility and silent support is something we can apply to our own lives. In a world where protagonism is valued, Zipporah shows us that true strength often resides in those who are alongside, without drawing attention to themselves. Her story is a reminder that everyone has a critical role to play, even if they're not in the spotlight. She faced challenges with courage, faced prejudice, and remained true to herself and her family. Zipporah teaches us that sometimes the greatest impact we can have is through constant support and a discreet presence in difficult times. Her life is also a lesson in how to overcome cultural barriers and maintain your identity amid change. In an increasingly globalized world, where people often find themselves in environments different from what they knew, Zipporah is an example of adaptation without losing the essence. She balanced her Midianite roots with her new role among the Hebrews, demonstrating that true strength lies in maintaining your integrity while embracing the new. Today, his lessons of courage and authenticity are more relevant than ever. And so, we see that Zipporah's story is an example of overcoming, resilience, and silent love. Your journey inspires us to face our own challenges with faith and inner strength, knowing that even if our actions are not always recognized, they can have a profound impact. Now, we conclude by exploring the final lessons we can learn from Zipporah and how we can apply this knowledge to our own lives. When we reach the end of Zipporah's journey, we realize how much her story was marked by silences, but also by decisive moments. Zipporah, despite not always being highlighted in biblical narratives, played a crucial role in the life of Moses and, consequently, in the liberation of Israel. Their quiet strength, their unshakable faith, and their ability to deal with the hardships of desert life teach us that often the greatest contributions come from those behind the scenes. Her story is a reminder that everyone has an important role to play, even if they are not always recognized. Zipporah's life was one of sacrifice, courage, and faith. She faced prejudices, distances, and cultural challenges, and yet remained faithful to her husband and the divine mission he carried. Through his example, we learn that one person's silent support can be what keeps great missions going. Zipporah's journey reveals how love and dedication to a greater purpose can transform not just a family, but an entire nation. Its impact is felt even in the shadows, and its absence from biblical narratives only further highlights its invisible importance. Uncovering the story of Zipporah is, in a way, unraveling the many untold stories of women in the Bible and history in general. She represents those whose lives have been dedicated to supporting something greater, without the pursuit of personal recognition or glory. As we reflect on his journey, we connect with the many figures who silently and constantly shape the world. Zipporah's legacy is, therefore, a call to recognize the value of those who, with their discreet actions, change the course of history. Now that her story has been revealed, we can now apply Zipporah's lessons to our own lives. Your strength, resilience, and dedication are qualities we can all cultivate. And so, we end our journey with Zipporah, taking with us her silent wisdom and the certainty that, even in the shadows, we can impact the world in powerful ways.
If you're interested in having a Bible like the one we use in our studies, check out the link in the first pinned comment. If you enjoy our content and can support our channel, consider buying us a coffee through Buy Me a Coffee. Additionally, if you can purchase a crucifix, we also have a link in the first pinned comment. We greatly appreciate your support. God bless and see you in the next video.